Virtua Racing on the Sega Mega Drive, also known as the Sega Genesis, was a groundbreaking racing game for its time, offering a 3D polygonal racing experience that was revolutionary on 16-bit hardware. Developed by Sega AM2 and originally released as an arcade game in 1992, the Mega Drive port of Virtua Racing was released in 1994, and it showcased the technical capabilities of the console through the use of a specialized chip to enhance its graphics performance. Virtua Racing was the first racing game on the Mega Drive to use 3D polygonal graphics instead of the 2D sprite-based visuals commonly seen on the console. This gave the game a more modern look and feel, similar to its arcade counterpart. To achieve its impressive 3D graphics on the Mega Drive, Sega included a special chip inside the game cartridge called the Sega Virtua Processor, SVP. This chip allowed the system to handle the complex calculations required to render 3D polygons, which the standard hardware couldn't do effectively on its own. The inclusion of the SVP made Virtua Racing one of the most technically impressive games on the console. Virtua Racing on the Mega Drive is considered a landmark title for its technical achievements. It demonstrated that 3D polygonal graphics were possible on 16-bit consoles, even if they required additional hardware support. The game also paved the way for future 3D racing games on more advanced platforms, including the Sega Saturn and Sega 32X, which had their own ports of Virtua Racing. The development of Virtua Racing for the Mega Drive, Genesis, was an ambitious and technically challenging process. Originally designed as an arcade game by Sega AM2, it was developed under the direction of legendary game designer Yu Suzuki, who wanted to push the boundaries of 3D gaming and provide a more realistic racing experience. The challenge of bringing such an advanced arcade game to a much less powerful home console required significant innovation and ingenuity. Virtua Racing began as a cutting-edge arcade game, released in 1992, running on Sega's Model 1 arcade hardware, which was extremely powerful for its time. This hardware allowed the game to feature 3D polygonal graphics with smooth frame rates and responsive controls, offering a level of realism and fluidity rarely seen in games at that time. Yu Suzuki and the team at Sega AM2 were responsible for designing the arcade version of Virtua Racing, which was a technical showcase, featuring real-time 3D polygons. Suzuki had already built a reputation for pushing the envelope with previous titles like Outrun and Afterburner, but Virtua Racing marked a new era of 3D visuals and simulation-like racing. The game pioneered the use of multiple camera views in racing games, including the now common third-person perspective and cockpit view, which enhanced immersion and gameplay flexibility. The Mega Drive's hardware was never designed to handle 3D polygonal graphics. Most games on the console used 2D sprites and pre-rendered backgrounds. Bringing a fully 3D game like Virtua Racing to the Mega Drive required significant compromise and innovation. Rendering polygons in real time on the Mega Drive was nearly impossible due to the system's limited processing power. The development team knew they would need external hardware to boost the system's capabilities, similar to how certain Super Nintendo games used enhancement chips like the Super FX. To make the port of Virtua Racing possible, Sega engineers developed the Sega Virtua Processor, SVP, chip, an add-on microchip embedded in the Virtua Racing cartridge. The SVP acted as a co-processor, offloading much of the complex mathematical calculations required to render 3D polygons, essentially boosting the Mega Drive's capabilities. The inclusion of the Sega Virtua Processor, SVP, chip made Virtua Racing one of the most expensive cartridges for the Sega Mega Drive. It retailed for around $100 at launch, significantly higher than most games on the system, which typically ranged from $50 to $70. The price was a direct result of the added technology in the cartridge, which allowed the game to handle 3D polygonal graphics on the 16-bit hardware. The high price was a barrier for some players, limiting its overall sales potential compared to more affordable titles. However, many enthusiasts and Sega fans were willing to pay the premium to experience the groundbreaking 3D gameplay. Virtua Racing was released in 1994, towards the end of the Mega Drive's life cycle, when many gamers were already shifting their attention to newer hardware like the Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and Nintendo 64, which offered native 3D gaming without the need for expensive add-ons. While exact sales numbers for Virtua Racing on the Mega Drive aren't widely available, the game sold hundreds of thousands of copies, a respectable figure for a late-generation title with such a high price tag. Although it wasn't a massive blockbuster in terms of raw sales, it performed well enough to justify Sega's investment in the SVP chip for this game. However, due to the high production cost, it wasn't as profitable as other titles that sold more units at lower price points.